Hi, welcome to Intro to Texturing. Today we're going to go ahead and get started with basic texturing. We're going to start with just doing a box. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is create a box like we have already learned how to do. And I'm just going to, I could make this any size I really want it. But I'm just going to make it 40 by 40 by 40. I'm going to leave the segments the way they are. And I'm going to convert this to an editable poly. So right now this box, we can change the colors and everything, but we have not done any kind of texturing yet. In order to even begin with any kind of texturing, we need to have the material editor open. And that's this button right here with the world and then like a piece of paper layout icon with the checkered pattern on it. So we have here our what's called the slate editor. You can scroll down here to see the different settings. We have a bunch of different parameters and our shaders here. And now this is the compact material editor, and I typically just use the slate. It's just a little bit easier. We have a previous material that I've already applied on here. So I'm just going to delete that so that you can get a better idea. So first things first, right? We need some sort of type of material. What is this? Is it, a shell, double-sided? Is it an architectural standard? There's all kinds of different settings, and you can look these up to get more information on them. But I'm going to just go ahead and grab and put a standard over here. I am then going to make sure that my box is selected. So I just hit W, and I can see the arrows. I know it's selected. I'm just going to right-click and assign material to selection. There's also a shortcut button over here that says Assign Material to Selection. You can click that too, and it assigns it. Now I need to actually pick, I want to make this like a Mario coin box, the ones that Mario hits, right? So what I'm going to do, now that we have our standard material, what I need next is the type of map. Now that I've got a material assigned, I need a map. And there's lots of different maps here. You've got some pre-settings like marble, stucco. There's even one for smoke. We've got one for tiles, wood. And you can use a lot of these together to create a lot of different texturing. But what we're going to do is just drag over bitmap. Now, bitmap means bitmap image, as in other words, it's bitmap, like in bits, like points, basically. Like all images are pretty much bitmaps in this case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select, let's see. I want to see the textures that I've already edited that fit here. There we go. All right, so we have a question mark box here. I'm going to select. And I'm just going to literally drag this circle into the diffuse. The diffuse is the main color, just the color, right? Obviously, we can get into like glossiness, like how glossy it is, specular, the amount of specular lighting, like how the light is affected when it hits it. And we've got several other options that we'll get into later. So now that we've got this texture assigned, you'll notice the object is gray and we don't see anything. And if we rendered this, we would see it, but we want to see it in the viewport. So there's two ways we could have it to be viewable. We could either right-click on the material and we're looking for Show Shaded Material in Viewport. Or we could click this button right here, Show Shaded Material in Viewport. It looks like a checkered box with a little, yellow circle there. So I'm going to click that. Voila! There we go. We have a box that has a question mark all over it, and we've assigned the material, right? Now, this would get a little bit more complicated to change the sides, like if we wanted the other sides to be a different picture, we would have to change the information texturing-wise to actually do that. All right, so we have our box, and in order to assign each bottom piece to be a separate material, we actually have to assign a different material for each one. So we open back our material editor up here. I'll just go ahead and maximize this so we can see what we're doing here. So we have one material here. And I might even go ahead and rename this. And I can say question texture for this material, right? Then you can double click it, a picture, to make it smaller and bigger. So let's actually make this, we're gonna say grass texture. And I'm gonna change out this picture by double clicking on it. I get our options over here once it loads. And right here in the bitmap parameters, it shows where the image is. So if I click on that, I can select the grass and hit open. Voila, we have grass. So I need to go up to my standard here, drag out a standard material again. And I'm going to show you a different way to create a bitmap image. I can just grab the diffuse circle here, drag it out, say I want to create a standard bitmap. Voila, it asks me, what do you want to select? This time I'm going to select the ground, converting to the grass there. And I'm going to double click this material over here, and I'm going to call it mix texture. Right? And we grab out one more here. And this one I'm going to call it dirt, right? And we'll do the same way where we drag out the diffuse with a standard bitmap, and we'll load this plain dirt texture. I don't know what's up with that sad girl pencil sketch, but anyway. Alright, so we have our 3 materials here. Now, in order to apply all 3 materials, you have to have a multi-subject material. So I'm going to drag this over here under Material Standard. I'm going to drag the multi-sub-object out. Voila. If I double-click this, I get the settings over here. I've got 10 right now set. I'm going to set this to, I only need 3 materials, 1, 2, and 3. So 1 is our grass, 2 is the mix. Whoops. Yep, and then the last is dirt. Now, if you see here, the naming conventions didn't go through because I didn't have the right one double-clicked. So I'm going to go ahead and change this now to mix. Click off of it. I'm going to double-click this one. And then this one, I'm going to go ahead and say dirt texture. Now, we have our multi-sub-object right here that has 3 number materials. And that's where I can drag these to connect them. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. And these have IDs for a reason, because I need to assign these IDs to the polygons. So now I'm going to go ahead and close this. Actually, before I close this out, again, I only have the grass texture applied. So with my object selected, I'm going to, with this multi-sub-object material, I'm going to right-click and say, it's not on this menu, so let's see. I'm just going to select all of these here. No, I guess I have to do one at a time. So I click each material and click Show Shaded Material in Viewport, and it puts a red/blue on each of them so you know that they are viewable. So I can close this out. So now I have this assigned, right? And we'll go ahead and make this bigger here so we can just focus on this area. So now if I go into my polygons and I look here, I can just minimize some of these menus. Here's one that says Polygon Material IDs, right? We have 3 material IDs. So this one is set to 1 already. So what I'm going to do is shift-click the ones that go around it, and I'm going to set the ID to 2. And I just hit Tab to scroll down. And I'm going to click off of it. Alright, and then I'm going to click the bottom one and set this one to 3. So if we click it, it should show 3. Alright. So we've got those assigned now, and we still don't quite having it show up. So what I'm going to do is open back up the material editor, and just in case, I'm just going to make sure I have my element selected, and with this material multi-sub object, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hit Assign Material to Selection, and it's viewable in the viewport, and I just reassigned it, because before I only had the grass assigned. So now my multi-material sub-object has been assigned to it. So I can close that out, and voila, it's assigned. Now, because I skipped this step earlier, it didn't keep the material ID, so I need to go back and set that. So the top is supposed to be 1. Just hit Tab, click off. Alright, so the 1 is good to go. And let's go ahead and select the bottom and set this to 3. That should have changed it to the dirt. Dirt is number 3. Alright, and so I just refreshed it, and it came back, and it's got the correct material ID. Now, if it ever does that to you, what you can do is just click on your material, make sure it says Show on the correct multi-sub-object. So if we move this over, this is multi-sub-object material 40. So with the dirt selected, I just go to, oops, I would say Show on material number 40. So it's showing correctly on this one. Then the other easy way to do as well is to just disconnect this real quick. So I would just drag this out and then reconnect it. And generally speaking, that will refresh it for you so that it'll be showing correctly in the viewport here. So now if we do a render, we get nothing. So the first thing to do is bring up the render setup. That's the teapot with the paper icon. And we got a couple things that we're going to go over. So common here, the single is meaning it's a single frame, like a picture. It's just rendering a JPEG image. You can set it to render a range for animation, so that would render out how many frames you want. Area to render, I just leave that at view. That's whatever view you have selected, it's going to render. The resolution, we could make this high resolution if we really wanted to. Not really necessary at this point. Things that you can check if you have these in the future. For right now, we don't really necessarily need that. If we wanted to save the file, save it out as a JPEG, you would have to click Files here and select what you want to save it as. So we would select JPEG, and I would say something like Project14b, since this is the texturing section, and then your name. And it's rendering to the output folder, which is the default. So you can try the shared drive, which may not always work. So what I do is I just select the desktop, and I go ahead and click Save. Ask you for the quality. We just want close to best, so we can click OK, that's fine. And now if you notice, it says Save File, and here's the location that it's saving as. So for right now, if we wanted to do a test render and we don't want it to save, I can just uncheck that for now. The next thing we're going to do is scroll all the way to the bottom, and we have email notifications, scripts, and assign renderer. So assign renderer is the type of renderer that you're using to actually render. There's different, like, you could say, like manufacturers. So I'm going to click this ... right here to choose renderer, and I'm going to change this to default scan line. Yours should already be set to this because that's the default, and I have several others that I use for certain purposes. So I can just go ahead, and now that that's there, that's good to go. If I click render, it's just going to pull up the rendering button, and voila, now we have our object rendering. So if I rotate this, I can just close this out. So I could hit the little render frame window, and it renders, or I could also hit F9, and it's rendering. So we can see the top texture is quite a bit, the resolution is different. And so we can simply fix that by going into the material editor. We would double click our bitmap, and we've got some tiling features and some offset. So we could test out. So right now it's tiling it by 1 and so forth on the U and V, which is basically like X and Y. So it's tiling it up and down, left and right. So let's change that. Let's just try changing the settings here and see what we get. So we just do 0.5. Aha, there we go. You noticed it got bigger. And because it's not tiling by 1, which would be how big the texture is, so I made it half that to make it tile smaller. Which is kind of hard to explain, but you can at least see just by doing that. So if I tile this by, say, 5, it's going to take the JPEG image that I have, and it's going to tile it 5 times. And you can see it. So if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's going the same direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have it tiling 5 times. If we just did 2, it's kind of hard to see right now, but with 5, it was pretty easy to see. Let's see if we can tell with 4. Yep, you can kind of tell with 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can kind of see this distinct pattern being repeated. So we're just going to go back to 0.5. I could also use the arrows here to move it up and down, right? And you can even see what it's doing just by dragging the arrows. So if I squish it in or pull it out. 0.5. And that looks pretty good. They still look a little bit smaller, so let's try 0.4. 0.4. Now that's kind of looking like it's matching up a little bit better. Alright, so we got several other options here. So we're going to double click the bitmap for the mix, the ground and the grass. And I'm actually going to scroll down to output, and we get a curves box here. And to be able to kind of edit this, we have several settings right here. We've got the output amount, which at this point is not doing anything. We have the RGB offset, which is not going to do anything right now. We have the RGB level, and then we have enable color map, right? So we could do enable color map, and we get this right here. And typically, this allows us to make some color changes to it. So we'd say RGB, and we've got red, green, and blue. Right, and we can go in, and we can add points. But for this, it's only going to let us actually create a point for each one. So we don't really want that. We want to just try to quickly fix the coloring. Scroll back up here. And what we'll do is cover that next time to go over this how to use this, because this is a whole section in its own to kind of go over this. So you can research this on your own, just looking up the documentation on the Autodesk website, and it explains what exactly everything does on here. So we got our rendering, which we still have the same render, and now you can see, because I changed the settings, it's actually affecting it. So we need to change these back. Render again. And we'll just Control Z to get back there. Render, bam, there we go. So it's just the RGB offset. RGB level, making that brighter, which we could just put it at 0 and do a render. Let's just try 0.9 and do a render. I'm kind of getting a little bit darker. And it's going to start just fading it to black, though, at this point. So it'd be easier to take this image into Photoshop and just, without going over this whole option box, you can just simply make this a little bit brighter contrast. That way it will match up with that pretty quickly. All right. So now we could even duplicate this by holding Shift and dragging the box. And it asks us, do you want to copy an instance or reference? I'm just going to do instance, which means anything that I change to this will affect this. And this one here, I'm going to actually right-click on it and say Make Unique. What this does is create a separate texture, because this is now a separate object. These are all the same. So, and what that actually means by that is, for instance, if I take this one, and I take this edge, and I move it over, it affects all of them. Which I'm not going to do it this time. But this one, it didn't affect it all, because it's different. So what I can do in here is I can literally go back in here. Let's just select the element, go to Polygon, Alt-click the top to deselect it, and then I'm just going to set the material ID to 1, and then I get this grassy block now. So now if I move this one over, I may want to make this one an instance, and it's an instance of this block. So I have this block, and then this block, and they're almost, and they are separate, because this one here is now box 01, and this one is box 002. This is an instance of that box, and then these two are instances of this box. So I could go on and move these around so that I could get a setup of however I wanted to do it. Yeah, I could create some bitmap images of my own to make my own kind of Minecraft style textures and throw those in here. So if I render now, we have it just rendering this area. It says area to render selected. So we're just going to do view and hit render. And there we go. We have our setup rendering correctly, because it's rendering everything that's in the view, not just what's selected. And voila. So now if I wanted to save this, as I would for whatever you create your setup, what I'm going to need to do is click the render setup. And we're going to go back to where it says save file under render output. Click save file. And I could either hit render here, or I could just come back to this window and hit render. I could also just press this, the button next to it to render, or I could just click this button again, like I said, and it rendered it and should save it to the desktop. And now that I've rendered to the desktop, I've actually already opened the file on my second monitor, so I'm just going to go ahead and load that up right here. And you see Project14b_name, and there's my image. Now take in mind, though, that if we look at, whoops, wrong button here, if we look at our render setup, this image is only 640 by 480. So let's say if I was wanting to render out a car or a character and make it look really nice, this resolution is too low quality. You know, 800 and 600, we're getting higher, but these are just quickly so I can kind of render. But to render something that quality, I would say I want to go in here and select something else, like we have HD TV. It gives us some higher resolution settings, which I may want like 720p, which is 1280 by 720. Then if I render this out, it says, oh wait, do you want to confirm overwriting this because you already saved? You don't have to do this, but if you wanted to, you could. And so this gives us a higher resolution. Now right now, you're not going to really see it because we're using Minecraft style textures, and these are just low res, right? It's each square is a solid color, so it's not going to show. But if I had a fancy model, it would. So we've covered rendering and texturing, and you're getting to do a similar scene with textures. We have a Mario brick texture, and we also have the question mark box. So what you're going to do is you're just going to set up a scene real quick, either Mario style or Minecraft style, and just have a few boxes, you know, create a wall or something, or you can create sort of like a stylistic game. So I could just control click these, shift click them over, say instance, and I could do that several times and kind of create something. Maybe this is going to be a ground area, and I could throw on a couple other textures and have like some metal or wood blocks. So I'm kind of make like a Minecraft house, and there we have it, our 3D textured blocks in the style of Minecraft. Next up, we're going to texture a simple Minecraft character.